Good morning. This is Arlan Suderman, Chief Commodities Economist at StoneX, coming to you from the trading floor again this morning at about 9:15 in the morning on, Thursday, July the 3rd, the day before Independence Day here in the United States. The markets will be closed tomorrow for the Independence Day holiday. But we have a lot going on, and I wanted to be able to cover some of that for you before we go on a holiday break and talk about some of the things to keep track of as we go through the holidays. Um, an update of what's going on with President's tax bill. It went to the House, and as I explained in yesterday's video, the Senate approved it with some changes. So the House had a choice to make. They could either accept the changes or amend it again and send it back to the Senate. And every time they do that, they risk losing the votes that they need and having this fall apart. Why is that so critical? Because Senate rules allow you one shot per year to do reconciliation. Reconciliation is where you can bring a bill, budget-related bill, to the floor to debate and to vote with only needing 51 votes to do so in the Senate. Otherwise, you need 60 votes to do so, and the Democrats are determined to prevent that from happening, just as the Republicans did at times when the Democrats were in control. And so President Trump rolled everything into this one big bill. That included the budget, the fiscal budget for the year. That included the debt ceiling, which needs to be dealt with, as I explained yesterday, by sometime in August so the Treasury Department can meet its obligations and so that we don't default on any debt. That included the extending the tax cuts from 2017 permanently in many cases. Without that being done, the Democrats would have prevented President Trump from having his victory on that, and we would be facing the largest tax increase in the history of America on the first of the year, 2026. So had to get all this stuff and a number of other things in there as well, including funding for hiring ICE employees, more ICE employees, funding for more border patrol guards, many different things here in this bill, all rolled into one. So after some arm twisting by the president, he's apparently convinced enough Republicans to switch their votes to yes. And they apparently have the votes to now pass this and put it on his desk for him to sign on Independence Day, which should give him another victory. He's had a series of victories right now. The Democrats don't want to see that happen, and the House rules don't allow for a technical filibuster like what they do in the Senate, but they do allow for House leadership to have unlimited time for comments after debate for a bill has finished. Well, the debate on the bill has finished, and Representative Jeffries, who is the minority leader in the House, has decided to go on to a marathon speech to prevent President Trump from having that victory, to speak as long as he can on the bill. So as I'm here to making this video here this morning, it's been 4 hours and counting that he's been on the floor speaking, and he may be planning on going through the 4th of July holiday weekend. I don't know. But that's what's right now standing between the Congress and the vote and putting it on the president's desk. Now, whether you believe the bill is a good bill or not a good bill is not my objective to debate here this morning. What it would do was give some certainty to business. Now, that's only a piece of the puzzle. We'll get to the other piece here shortly, but a big piece of the puzzle, uncertainty, because for corporations, businesses, they want to know what's going to happen with taxes on January 1 before they make decisions about expansion. Consumers want to know what's going to happen with taxes before they make decisions on long-term purchases. So a number of other things. That is one of the big pieces of the puzzle in granting certainty. Whether you agree with it, good or bad, at least it would be some certainty on what the future holds from that regards. The other piece of the puzzle then is on the tariffs. And of course, the 90-day pause in reciprocal tariffs expires on July the 9th. July 8th, if you're technical, and July 9th, they would go back up to the level set on April 2nd. And so where do we stand on that? We've heard over the last few months repeated statements, we're close to deals, we're close to deals, we're close to deals, and they haven't come. We had the deal with the United Kingdom, and then now we have another one, and that's with Vietnam. And I talked about that in my midday commentary yesterday. This is a highly significant agreement. First of all, Vietnam is a neighbor to China. And China's been using Vietnam as a pass-through for shipments, transshipments of its products through Vietnam to the United States. And President Trump, and as I've said many times before, I believe that President Trump, one of his objectives with the tariffs is to try to contain China, and that we would see trade agreements with these various countries that include clauses that help to contain China. And this is an example of that achieved with one of China's neighbors. Vietnam's been doing a lot of trade with China as well, getting many of the products that they need and commodities they need from China. This opens a door for them to get it from the United States. Now, the tariffs that Vietnam was charging the United States were set at roughly 90%. And under this agreement, well, our reciprocal tariffs were at 46% set on April 2nd, according to the tables that I was able to find. We were set at 46%. This agreement reached between President Trump and the General Secretary, the head person in Vietnam at their government level, would drop those to 20%. Except for transshipments, which would stay at 40%. So goods coming through Vietnam from China would stay at 40%. Now, China has been threatening, including repeating over the last week, any country that signs an agreement with the United States that hurts China, there will be retaliation against that country. So this will get interesting, but it also provides a framework then for President Trump to seek other agreements from other countries that have similar language within them. In return, Vietnam takes its tariffs on U.S. products from 90% to zero, according to what's being reported. And that opens the door from a commodity standpoint. Now, for trade overall, it really opens the door for U.S. autos to go to Vietnam, particularly the big SUVs that Vietnam drivers like, consumers like. It also allows U.S. commodities into Vietnam when they're price competitive. Vietnam just passed a bill to go to a 10% ethanol blend in gasoline starting next year, for January 1 of next year. So it opens the door for them to import large quantities of ethanol if they're price competitive. It opens the door for them to buy dried distillers grains and solubles, which they utilize, corn, wheat, pork, beef. They love beef as a luxury item, and so it opens a door for that. All these commodities and more could see movement into Vietnam. So this is very positive. And we did see the markets firm, the ag commodity markets firm yesterday when this agreement was announced. But they really picked up some momentum when a rumor went around that China was about to make some significant purchases, perhaps some goodwill gesture purchases. But also there are rumors out there that China may want to extend or may be in the process of probing the possibility of recommitting to the phase one trade deal to buy U.S. agricultural commodities that it signed with President Trump during his first term in office. Now, I'm going to remain a skeptic until I see large quantities of commitments of U.S. ag commodities by China. But that is a possibility, and I can't rule it out. I'm always skeptic about rumors about China, but I'm saying this one does have some possibilities. We have seen the economic data in China continue to show problems, except for those areas that have been heavily subsidized. But even some of those areas heavily subsidized, we're seeing a loss of momentum now. And as a result, foreign direct investment, which has been largely what props up the Chinese economy and funds its growth, has also been dropping at a fast pace. China needs to turn that around. Now, they still want to play the long game and win the long game. And any of these agreements will only last for the duration while Trump is in office. But they also would really love to be able to access the US consumer market, which is worth far more to them than paying extra for US ag commodities. And I did say pay extra because as long as Brazil's currency is as cheap as it is, their ag commodities are going to be cheaper to buy when they're available than US ag commodities. But if China commits to paying more in order to have access to our consumer market, then that does offer the opportunity over the next few years for larger US exports while we're building our biofuel program, our domestic demand, if you will, in order to be able to absorb the lost exports when President Trump's no longer in office. So that's a possibility here we must respect, and why we saw, I'm going to say, mostly short covering yesterday by speculative funds on the possibility that that was the case. Now, I don't think there's a lot of belief at this point that it is the case, but when funds are heavily short, they're going and they think this is a possibility and prices are this low. Maybe we should consider that possibility and ease back on the short positions. Now, as we go into the holiday weekend, growing conditions for the nation's corn and soybean crops remain very good. And if we come out of this holiday weekend on Sunday night and the 15-day outlook is still looking favorable, that'll look past the midway point in corn pollination, then we could see a lot more heavy selling in corn if we don't have favorable news on the trade front, so to speak, the demand to absorb those extra bushels going forward. We expect to hear more announcements next week about trade deals and or renewed increased tariffs. So next week will be very pivotal in the whole trade situation, tariff situation for these markets, for the outside markets as well as for the US markets. We did see a jobs report this morning that overall was much better than what the trade feared. And as a result, that's helping to support the markets this morning. We did see Treasury yields pop on the employment numbers overall. Now, the private sector only added a little more than 70,000 jobs. We did see a big surge in state government and local government jobs. A lot of them were education oriented, et cetera. Federal government jobs dropped by, I think, another 7,000 once again. But overall, when you look at the numbers, these were not numbers that justify the Fed cutting rates at their July meeting based on the metrics that they used to make those decisions. And so now the debate comes, will those numbers show in September justifying the Fed cutting rates in September or not? So we go forward now, looking forward to next week. What's going to happen with weather? What's going to happen with the tariffs? What's going to happen with trade deals? One more thing on the biofuels program. With this bill now assumed to pass Congress and go to the president's desk, that gives us very favorable numbers for the biofuel program going forward. We still have not heard from the EPA on small refinery exemptions that could still pull the rug out from underneath of this biofuel program. But the tendency overall from the Trump administration has been to support agriculture during this tariff war via the biofuels program. So there is optimism in the industry now, cautious optimism that small refinery exemptions will not undermine this program. Well, we simply won't know that until that's the case. But we are seeing soy oil prices rise because this bill, combined with the RVOs, basically favors North American feedstocks, which should largely eliminate used cooking oil from China, etc. So it should be good for U.S. soy oil demand, canola demand, reshape the world markets. We should see soy oil relative to palm oil have much more of a premium, maybe see the food industry move more toward importing oils as the biofuel industry seeks out the supplies of domestically produced oils to use as a feedstock for biofuel production. Um, but overall, that's the direction we're certainly heading right now as we move forward with this bill, to assuming it reaches the president's desk at some point when Representative Jeffries finishes his talk. We do know that President Trump is scheduled to be in Iowa today. Does that mean some type of announcement relative to agriculture? That's something else to keep watch for today as we go into this 3-day holiday weekend. And I'll be back with you next week with the highlights of what happens, what changes, keep you up to date from the trading floor as we continue. I hope you have a safe and enjoyable Independence Day holiday with your family. Thank you.